Maestro. Collaborate. In harmony. The 3 waves of corporate communication. The first wave? Email.
Email represents the first wave in electronic communication. First, let's examine the components of a message. They are the sender, the receiver, and the subject. In this first wave, the pivot is the sender. That means the sender determines the recipient or the destination of the message. The sender is expected to choose recipients based on a few factors. First, by considering the contents of a message, and then, by applying a thorough understanding of the company's workflow, a sender will correctly distribute that message to everyone who should be informed. Right? Right. This would work for small groups, where the workflow is simple and everyone's expertise within the group is well understood by other members. However, as the size of a group increases, so does its complexity. And that's where things start to go haywire. The network is flooded with irrelevant messages to the wrong recipients, and the result is more noise than information. As you can imagine, this will quickly lead to communication paralysis.
The second wave. Social channels.
In the second wave, we replace the sender with a subject as the new pivot. That means the subject determines the senders and receivers. By examining the group's workflow, a number of relevant subjects based on the critical elements of the workflow or people's roles, we create custom communication channels, hoping they can truly represent the key elements in the workflow. Then, each individual in the group determines the relevance of the subject to his role in the group and subscribes to the channel of interest. The sender is no longer burdened with identifying the recipients for the subject matter. He simply identifies a relevant channel and posts related information into or receives information from the channel. So far, so good. It's definitely a major leap over email and a step in the right direction. But there are a few problems. And as we'll demonstrate, while this model may work for small groups or teams, it begins to fall apart in more complex settings as it struggles to scale for the entire organization. As the size of the organization or group increases, there are more subjects or channels. That situation is exacerbated if there is not a central control of channel creation and users are allowed to create channels at will. Here, the fundamental problem is that the workflow is missing. The assumption is that we can represent our workflow by creating a few appropriately named channels. By the way, naming the channels appropriately turns out to be a critical and challenging part of this process. Who has the responsibility of creating these channels, and based on what model are they created? How do we incorporate our workflow into this setup, besides hoping that everyone can figure out the purpose of these channels and their relations to one another, and pray that subscribers understand the purpose of each channel and when to use one over another? And as we begin to scale, this starts to fall apart under the weight of so many channels. Is there a clean solution to this critical problem that every medium to large organization grapples with? One where human communication is an integral part of the organization's workflow, where we can easily and seamlessly bring our organization's collective knowledge and focus together to accomplish our work. As it turns out, the answer is yes, And as we shall see, the solution requires a major paradigm shift, one where channels automatically emerge from workflow.
The third wave. MÆSTRO. A paradigm shift.
In our prior models, we discussed how email and social media depend on individuals to create subject and channels as pivots. The third wave doesn't rely on individuals nor subjects and channels, but instead shifts the pivot to the entities comprised within workflow. What do I mean by that? Products are made up of components, and each component is a pivot for a group of stakeholders. Since this new pivot is tied to workflow, individuals can now focus their energy and communication around the specific components critical to producing the end product, as these entities make their way across production. Each of these entities has its own unique identifier, already in use and familiar to everyone within an organization. So there's no need for anyone to identify recipients or create channels, since each component contains its own chat channel, where stakeholders communicate about the specific entity with which they're involved. In the third wave, conversation is now focused where it should be, on workflow. Here, stakeholders now become integral participants in production, where they can affect changes in real time when it counts, before delays are produced. By focusing on workflow, the third wave shines a more brilliant light towards a brighter era in corporate communication.
MÆSTRO. Collaborate in harmony.